Get your hands where I can see them. On the wall. Now, the lobby of the Veterans Affairs Regional Office in Columbus, Ohio, had fluorescent lights that flickered every time the HVAC system cycled on. Marcus Webb noticed things like that. 22 years in the Marine Corps trained a man to notice details others let slide. The flicker, the draft from the north-facing door, the positioning of the 3 security cameras mounted at ceiling height, and the fact that Officer Craig Denton was already reaching for his radio before Marcus had said a single word. Marcus set both hands flat against the cool cinder block wall. His palms were visible. His shoulders were square. His voice, when he spoke, was the voice of a man who had issued orders in 4 countries and never once raised it to do so. I'm here for a 9 o'clock appointment with the benefits coordinator. My name is Marcus Webb. I have documentation in my left breast pocket if you need it. Denton stepped closer. 31 years old, face like a fist, neck tattoo, just visible above his collar. I've been watching you for 10 minutes, pal. You've been pacing around this lobby like you own the place. I arrived early. I was waiting. You were casing the office. The handful of people in the lobby had gone still. A woman with a cane near the window. An older man in a VFW hat. A young receptionist behind the desk who looked at her screen and did not look up. A teenager in the corner with his phone already raised. Then Denton did something that no one in that lobby, no one watching the footage later, would be able to explain or defend. He leaned in close. And he spit. Not on Marcus, just past him. Against the wall, 6 inches from his face. A slow, deliberate, contemptuous act that had a very specific meaning, and everyone in that lobby knew what it meant. Marcus did not move, did not flinch. His hands remained flat and still against the wall. He had no idea. Craig Denton had no idea that the man he just humiliated in front of 7 witnesses and 3 cameras was a decorated Marine Master Sergeant. And he had no idea, could not have known, that the man watching from the back office on a security monitor, who had just risen from his chair and was already reaching for his phone, was Army Brigadier General Alton James, the man who had written Marcus Webb's last 3 commendation letters, the man who had personally pinned his Meritorious Service Medal, a man who had 41 years of military service, a direct line to the governor, and approximately 0 tolerance for what he had just watched happen in a federal building. In 47 minutes, Craig Denton's career would be over. In 47 minutes, he wouldn't know it yet. But this story doesn't start in that lobby. This story starts 22 years earlier, in a recruiting office in East Columbus, where a 19-year-old named Marcus Antoine Webb signed his name on a line and became something that lobby and that officer could never take away from him. Marcus Webb grew up in the Linden neighborhood of Columbus, in a house where the water pressure was unreliable, and the heat sometimes went out in January, but the books never ran out. His mother, Gloria, worked 31 years as a licensed practical nurse at Mount Carmel East. She raised 3 children mostly alone after Marcus's father, Robert, died of a heart attack at 53. Worked to death, Gloria said, quietly, when she thought the children were asleep. Marcus was 14 when Robert died. He spent the next 5 years watching his mother. That was his real education. He joined the Marines at 19 because he wanted to be useful, and because he could not afford college. He stayed for 22 years because he was exceptional at it. By the time he separated from active duty in 2021, Master Sergeant Marcus Webb had completed 3 combat deployments: Iraq, Afghanistan, and an advisory role in West Africa that he was not permitted to discuss in detail. He had been awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, the Combat Action Ribbon, the Meritorious Service Medal, twice, and a Presidential Unit Citation. He had trained 340 junior enlisted Marines in combat marksmanship and field logistics. He had been recommended for sergeant major 3 times. The third time, he declined because his mother's health was declining, and Columbus needed him more than the Corps did. He had been back in Ohio for 18 months when he walked into that VA office for a routine appointment about his disability rating. He was wearing a clean button-down shirt and slacks. He was carrying a manila folder with 6 documents tabbed and labeled in the order he expected to need them. He was 11 minutes early. On his kitchen counter at home, there was a photograph in a plain black frame. A younger Marcus, 23 years old, in dress blues at Camp Lejeune, standing next to his mother. Gloria was wearing a yellow dress. She had driven 9 hours from Columbus with a cousin to be there for his promotion to corporal, and she had that look on her face. The look of a woman who had worked every double shift and skipped every vacation for 14 years and was now watching it become something. Marcus looked at that photograph every single morning, not because he needed the reminder, because he thought the country should know what it cost. He kept his disability paperwork in the manila folder. His right knee, the result of a vehicle rollover outside Kandahar in 2011. His left shoulder, a rotor cuff tear from a training incident in 2016 that had been insufficiently repaired and had required a second surgery he paid for, partially out of pocket. The paperwork was meticulous. Every date, every facility, every signature. 22 years of service documented to the standard he had applied to everything else. 3 blocks away, Brigadier General Alton James was in that same building for a meeting with the regional director about veteran services funding. James was 58, gray at the temples, and had spent 4 decades watching institutions fail the people they were supposed to serve. He was in the building manager's back office when he glanced at the security monitor, recognized the posture of a military man being treated as a threat, and felt something cold move through him. He recognized Marcus Webb 2 seconds before the spit. Craig Denton had 17 years on the force. He had been awarded Officer of the Year in 2019, a commendation that his captain, Linda Ferrara, had pushed through despite 8 complaints filed against Denton in the previous 4 years. 8 complaints. All 8 reviewed. All 8 closed without discipline. One of the reviewing officers had been Denton's former partner. Another had been Ferrara's brother-in-law. The system that was supposed to catch Craig Denton had been staffed at every critical point by people who already knew Craig Denton and had decided what they thought of him. He had no idea that the system had just run out of room to protect him. Marcus kept his hands on the wall. He counted. In his head, quietly, with the same methodical focus he applied to every situation that required him to think clearly under stress. He cataloged what was happening. Unlawful detainment. No probable cause stated. Violation of Title 18, Section 242. Deprivation of rights under color of law. The physical act itself, whether it met the threshold for assault, depended on proximity and intent, and proximity had been well within the threshold. 3 security cameras. 7 witnesses. 1 phone already recording. 2 more that he had noticed since. He said, calmly, "Officer, I'd like to speak with your supervisor. My supervisor's busy. I'd like to wait for them. You're not in a position to make requests right now. What am I being detained for?" Suspicious behavior. Can you define the behavior? Denton put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. Not hard. Just enough to make a point about who was in charge of this conversation. He had done this 100 times. He had the motion down to muscle memory, the casual placement, the easy weight of it, the way it said everything that his badge already said without requiring him to raise his voice. 38 minutes. Denton pulled out a notepad. He wrote something. He was, Marcus noticed, writing slowly, the pen moving with the leisured confidence of a man who had never once found himself on the wrong side of the paperwork. He capped his pen and tucked it away. He glanced at his phone. No messages. He looked around the lobby. The receptionist was back on her screen. The older man in the VFW hat had sat back down and was reading a pamphlet. The world, from where Craig Denton stood, was proceeding normally. In the back office, General James was on his phone. He had made 2 calls. The first was to his aide-de-camp. The second was to a name in his contacts, listed simply as D. Richardson, Deputy Director of the Ohio Department of Public Safety. Outside in the lobby, a woman with a cane was filming. She had positioned herself near the window and angled her phone without looking at it. Her name was Bernice Hayward. She was 64 years old, a retired schoolteacher, and she had grown up watching things happen to black men in rooms where no one recorded anything. She had promised herself, a long time ago, that she would not be that person who looked at her screen and did not look up. She pressed record, and she held her phone steady, and she kept her face neutral. The way women her age had learned to keep their faces neutral when they were doing something that mattered. The young man in the corner, the one with his phone already raised, zoomed in. His name was Darius Kemp. He was 19. He had 37 followers. By 11 o'clock that morning, he would have 43,000. Denton radioed for a second officer. Marcus stood at the wall. His breathing was controlled. His hands were visible. Everything by the book, every second, because Marcus Webb understood something that Craig Denton did not. When this was over, and it was going to be over, the record would matter more than anything else. The record was what won. Documentation wins. Emotion loses. Evidence is everything. And he was standing inside a building with 3 cameras and 7 witnesses, and he intended to give them nothing but the cleanest possible version of himself. The second officer arrived. His name was Thomas Achebe, and he was 26 years old. And the moment he walked into the lobby and understood what was happening, something moved across his face, something he swallowed. He stood where he was positioned and did not speak. Denton leaned against the front desk. He was talking to the receptionist now. He had a relaxed posture that Marcus registered and noted. The man was comfortable. He was not rethinking anything. He was narrating to the receptionist in a low voice. Something about the morning. Something about the kind of day it had already been. And the receptionist was nodding with the careful, practiced neutrality of someone who had learned not to have opinions in uniform. 22 minutes. Marcus had not moved from the wall. His hands were still visible. He had, in the last 12 minutes, counted the violations 6 more times in his head and arrived at the same number. He had thought about his mother's face in the yellow dress. He had thought about the 23 Marines he had trained who were, at this moment, somewhere in the world doing what he had trained them to do. And he thought about what it would mean if they were watching. He thought about the youngest one, a kid from Detroit named Holloway, who used to fall asleep doing paperwork, and what Holloway would say if he could see Marcus Webb at this wall, in this lobby, with this man's hand on his shoulder, and a rookie beside him who knew better and was not doing better. He thought, the record is what wins. Hold the line, hold the line, hold the line. Denton's radio crackled. He answered it. He listened. His expression did not change. He clicked off and said something to Achebe that Marcus couldn't hear. 14 minutes. Denton pulled up something on his phone and laughed quietly at it. He showed it to Achebe. Achebe did not react. Denton put the phone away and stretched his neck from side to side and looked at Marcus with the expression of a man who was already writing the report in his head and was satisfied with how it was going to read. He had been an officer for 17 years. He had filed exactly this type of report. Subject became agitated. Unlawful detainment for the safety of bystanders. No use of force beyond necessary contact. enough times to file it in his sleep. The paperwork was routine. The union was reliable. The captain was Linda Ferrara. And Linda Ferrara had never once let a complaint go anywhere that mattered. And Craig Denton had known for 17 years that there were no consequences for men like him in buildings like this. He had no idea that the building had changed, that General James was 40 yards away, that 3 cameras were running, that Bernice Hayward's phone was steady against the window, and Darius Kemp had already sent a text that read, "Something is happening at the VA on Cleveland Avenue. I'm recording. This is bad." He had no idea that in 11 minutes, his entire career would become a case study. General James walked into the lobby at 9:17 a.m. He was not in uniform. He was wearing a gray suit and a striped tie and shoes that his wife had polished the night before, because she always polished his shoes the night before a meeting that mattered. He walked through the lobby door with the unhurried stride of a man who had never once in his life needed to announce himself to command a room. He saw Marcus at the wall. He saw Denton beside him. He said, "Craig," not loudly, not from across the room. He said it from 6 feet away, the same distance a Marine says the name of a subordinate who has just done something that cannot be undone. Denton turned. He had never heard this man's voice before, but something in the register of it, the absolute, unhurried certainty of it, made him turn before he understood why. "Sir, step away from that man." Sir, this individual was, step away. The lobby had gone completely quiet. The flickering light. The draft from the north-facing door. 7 people, none of them moving. Denton stepped back. Not because he understood, because he could not do anything else. General James walked to Marcus's side. They were the same height. They had served in overlapping theaters on 4 separate occasions. They had never stood in this particular room together, but they had stood in rooms like it. Rooms where the ceiling was too low and the stakes were too high. And the only thing between chaos and outcome was how clearly a man thought under pressure. James put his hand briefly on Marcus's arm. A soldier's gesture. Then he turned to face Denton fully. "Do you know who this man is?" Denton's jaw was tight. "A suspect in a. His name is Master Sergeant Marcus Antoine Webb, United States Marine Corps, retired. 3 combat deployments. 2 meritorious service medals. A commendation I wrote personally 18 months ago." A pause. "He is also currently contracted as a civilian advisor to the Joint Reserve Training Center on Broad Street, which makes him a federal employee of the Department of Defense on a day when he walked into a federal building for a scheduled appointment and was assaulted by a uniformed officer." The word assault landed in the lobby like something dropped from a great height. Denton's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "My name is Brigadier General Alton James. I have been on the phone with the Deputy Director of Public Safety for the last 19 minutes. I have the security footage. I have 7 witnesses. And I have a very clear question for you." General James's voice did not rise. It never rose. "Do you need me to explain what happens next? Or would you prefer to call your union representative right now?" Denton looked at the cameras. He looked at the phones. He looked at Thomas Akabe, who had taken 3 quiet steps to the left and was no longer standing anywhere near him. The color drained from his face slowly, the way it drains from people who are not used to being seen. Marcus Webb straightened his collar. He picked his manila folder up from the floor where Denton had knocked it. He turned to the receptionist, who was finally looking up from her screen. "I believe I have a 9 o'clock appointment," Marcus said. "I apologize for the delay." By 11 that morning, Darius Kemp's video had been picked up by 4 local news stations. By 2 in the afternoon, it was on national television. By 6 o'clock, Bernice Hayward's footage, the one from the better angle, the one that showed the full 3 seconds of what Denton had done, had won 1 million views and was being discussed in federal oversight channels that Denton had never heard of and could not have imagined. Captain Linda Ferrara was on paid administrative leave by 4 p.m. The city's Independent Police Review Board opened an emergency session. The Ohio Attorney General's office requested the complete file on Craig Denton, all 17 years of it, including the 8 complaints that had been closed without discipline. The Justice Department field office in Columbus opened a parallel inquiry that same evening. Marcus Webb gave a press statement on the steps of the VA building at 7 o'clock. He wore the same button-down shirt and the same slacks. He was not angry. He was not trembling. He held no notes. He looked directly at the cameras. I am sharing this because I was in a position that most people would not have survived the same way. I had documentation. I had witnesses. I had a general who happened to be 40 yards away and happened to know my name. Most people do not have those things. The young man who was pulled over last week 3 miles from here, he didn't have those things. The woman who was detained at the Kroger on Livingston last spring, she didn't have those things. I'm not here to talk about what happened to me. I'm here to make sure what happened to me is the last time it happens to anyone in a building that is supposed to serve them. He paused. An institution that humiliates the people it exists to protect has already failed its mission. The question now is whether it is willing to fix itself. He answered 3 questions. He thanked no one individually. He walked back inside. General James watched from the side of the building with his aide-de-camp. His aide said something. James didn't respond for a long moment. Then he said, "Write up everything. Every name. Every date. Every complaint number. If the AG needs anything from me, I'll be available." Thomas Akebi went home that night and sat in his car in his driveway for 40 minutes. Then he went inside and told his wife what had happened and what he had done or not done and what he was going to do about it. He submitted a written statement to the review board the next morning. It was 11 pages. It named names. It was the most important document he had ever produced, and producing it cost him 3 friendships and a possible promotion that he had been tracking for 2 years, and he sent it anyway. Craig Denton was terminated from the Columbus Police Department 61 days after the incident. He was criminally charged under Title 18, Section 242, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and 1 count of assault in a federal building. He pled to the federal civil rights charge and received a sentence of 32 months. He served 27. He is permanently barred from law enforcement employment in the state of Ohio. He owes $74,000 in civil restitution, a judgment from the suit that Marcus Webb did not file personally but declined to block. He worked as a security guard briefly. He does not anymore. Captain Linda Ferrara resigned before the administrative review concluded. The 8 complaint files she had buried were referred to the federal investigation. Her brother-in-law, the reviewing officer, is under a separate inquiry. Her pension is under review. She cleaned out her office on a Tuesday evening. No ceremony. No escort. Just a banker's box and the particular silence of a building that has already decided what it thinks of you. Thomas Akebi completed ethics retraining, requested a department transfer, and now supervises a community policing unit on the Near East Side. He calls it the best work he has ever done. The people on those blocks are not always sure what to make of him. He thinks that's fair. He shows up anyway. Bernice Hayward's footage is now used in law enforcement ethics training in 3 Ohio counties. She does not know this. She is at home, retired, with her cane and her phone, pressing record when it matters. Darius Kemp has 280,000 followers. He covers city council meetings and police accountability hearings, and the kind of local news that nobody used to think was news. He is 20 years old. He is very good at it. General Alton James retired from federal service 8 months after the incident. At his retirement ceremony, he made brief remarks. He mentioned Marcus Webb by name. He said that the measure of an institution was not its best day, but its response to its worst one. He said Ohio had more work to do. The room applauded. He nodded once and sat down. Marcus Webb's disability rating was adjusted upward after a full review. The appointment he had come in for that morning. He uses the adjusted benefits to help cover his mother's home care. Gloria Webb, 67, is doing well. On Sunday morning, she watches the news. When Marcus's name comes up, she doesn't say anything. She just turns up the volume a little and sets down her coffee. Marcus still drives the same car he drove before any of this happened. He still arrives 11 minutes early to everything. He still notices the cameras, the drafts, the exits. 22 years of training doesn't leave a man. It just waits, quiet and ready, for the moment the room needs it. Until the system changes, he told his mother one evening on the porch, watching the light go flat over the neighborhood. Someone has to be watching. She reached over and put her hand on his. They had talked about this before. They would keep talking about it. The porch light came on automatically. The neighborhood settled into evening. And Marcus Webb sat in the same city where he was born, doing what he had always done, paying attention, staying ready, and refusing quietly, completely, and without apology, to be anything other than exactly who he was. If Marcus's story made you feel something, anger, pride, or just the need to sit with it for a moment, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like his don't travel on their own. We carry them. We pass them on. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been in a room where something wrong was happening and felt powerless to speak up? Or have you watched someone else refuse to be powerless? Tell us what that looked like. Your story matters here. Subscribe for more stories about people who refused to be invisible in systems that were counting on them to be. Because every view is a vote for the kind of record that actually changes things. Someone has to be watching. We're glad you're here.